I came home after an exhausting swim practice, my muscles itching from the strain, but I felt a pleasant tension. The cold water always helped clear my mind and wash away the day's worries. I dropped my sports bag on the floor by the door and walked into the living room, collapsing onto the couch and grabbing the remote to turn on the TV. The screen filled with the image of the local news anchor, her expression serious. A series of brutal murders has gripped our quiet town in fear. The latest victim, found late last night, had the same strange, unrecognizable bite marks that have baffled police and forensic experts, she said. I sighed heavily, feeling my heart tighten with anxiety. These murders had become the main topic of conversation in our small town, turning our peaceful lives into a nightmare. The anchor continued, one girl managed to escape the killer. She described him as a tall man in a black hooded cloak and blue jeans, breathing heavily. The description sent chills down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that these murders were connected to something sinister from the past. I recalled my grandmother's words, stories she told me about similar murders happening 80 years ago. I decided to visit her the next day to see if she remembered anything else. The next morning, I biked to my grandmother's house. The early summer sun cast long shadows, and the town seemed eerily quiet. When I arrived, she was sitting on the porch, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically, creating a soothing sound. Hi, Grandma, I greeted her, sitting down next to her. I need to ask you something. She looked up, her gaze sharp and insightful. Is it about the murders? She asked, not waiting for my response. I nodded. You mentioned similar murders happening long ago. Can you tell me more? She sighed, setting her knitting aside. I was just a little girl then, but I remember the fear that gripped the town. People were found dead with strange bite marks, and no one could explain it. Do you remember what happened to him? I leaned forward, my heart racing with anticipation. He vanished, she whispered. Some believed he was killed or died naturally, but his body was never found. And now it's happening again. But how? 80 years have passed. He shouldn't exist anymore. Her words sent a chill down my spine. How could someone or something return after so long? It didn't make sense. But one thing was clear. These murders were not the work of an ordinary person. That evening, I decided to go to a party with my friends Jerry and Tracy. Despite the fear that had gripped the town, we needed a break, a chance to feel normal for a while. Jerry had always been weak, and I had taken on the role of his protector over the years. Tracy, on the other hand, was the girl I liked, but I never had the courage to ask her out. The party was in full swing when we arrived. Laughter and music filled the air, and for a moment, the town's troubles seemed distant. We danced, talked, and tried to forget the darkness lurking outside. For a while, everything felt like the good old days. I grabbed Tracy's hand and asked her to dance. She smiled and nodded. We spun around, laughing and joking, trying to forget the nightmare that had gripped the town. As the night wore on, my mom called. Max, it's late. I don't want you out at night with everything that's happening. I'm coming to pick you up. I didn't argue. Okay, Mom. I'll be outside in a few minutes. I said goodbye to Jerry and Tracy. You guys should head home too. It's not safe at night. Jerry shrugged. We'll be fine. We're going in the opposite direction. I watched them go, a feeling of unease knotting my stomach. The next morning, I was woken by a frantic pounding on the door. It was Jerry, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. Max, Tracy's gone. She was taken last night. My heart pounded. Are you sure? How do you know? I saw it, Jerry stammered. I tried to help, but he was too strong. He knocked me out, and when I woke up, Tracy was gone. Did you go to the police? I grabbed my jacket. Yes, I just came back from the station. They took my statement, but I don't think they believe me. I noticed a strange mark on Jerry's arm, just above his wrist. What's that? I pointed to the bite mark. Jerry looked at it, seemingly puzzled. I don't know. I don't remember getting it. Chills ran down my spine. Something was definitely wrong. That evening, I secretly followed Jerry as he left his house. He seemed unaware of my presence, his steps slow and mechanical. He led me to the outskirts of town, to an old, long-abandoned house that had always terrified me as a child. Its crumbling walls and boarded-up windows made it look like a setting from a horror movie. Sneaking up to a cracked window, I saw Jerry talking to someone in a black cloak. The figure leaned in and bit Jerry on the other arm, causing him to flinch, but he remained still. It was like a scene from a nightmare. I barely held back a scream, watching my friend obey the will of this creature like a puppet. Horrified, I stepped back, accidentally kicking a stone. The cloaked figure's head snapped towards the noise, and I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I had to run before I was discovered. I sprinted home, my mind racing with what I'd seen. Every sound, every rustle seemed to be a sign of pursuit, but I didn't look back, afraid of seeing a shadow following me. The next day, determined to uncover the truth, I followed Jerry again. This time, he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by two people, their faces pale and lifeless. I kept a safe distance, trailing him through the streets of our town, which seemed darker and more ominous than ever. Once more, Jerry led me to the abandoned house on the outskirts of town. They entered the house, and I crouched in the shadows, watching. I couldn't take my eyes off the scene in front of me. Jerry and the two others entered the house, and I remained outside, trembling with tension. I crouched behind a bush, watching the house and waiting for Jerry to emerge. About 5 minutes later, Jerry came out of the house, his eyes vacant and his movements mechanical. I knew this was my chance. I sprang from my hiding place and ran towards him, my legs pounding the ground with determination. "Jerry," I shouted as I caught up to him. He turned, his eyes dull and unseeing. "I don't know you," he muttered, looking at me like a stranger. "Come on, it's me, Max." I grabbed him by the shoulders and started shaking him, hoping to snap him out of this strange trance. "What happened to you? What were you doing in that house?" But his gaze remained blank. Desperation welled up inside me. Not knowing what else to do, I mustered all my strength and slapped him across the face, hoping the physical shock would bring him back to reality. His eyes blinked, and he shook his head, as if waking from a nightmare. "Max? What? What happened?" His voice was weak and hoarse. "You were hypnotized," I said, trying to stay calm. "Do you remember anything?" He nodded slowly. "The last thing I remember is being bitten by the man in the cloak when I was saying goodbye to Tracy. Everything else is a blur." "Tracy." I grabbed his shoulders. "Is she still alive?" "I don't know." Jerry looked exhausted. "All I remember is pain and fear. He made me bring people to that house. I was like in a dream. We realized we couldn't let this continue any longer. We decided to go to the police and tell them everything we had learned." Jerry still looked weak, and his story might seem too unbelievable, but it was our only chance to stop the nightmare. We headed to the police station, where the detectives listened to our story with skepticism. I explained everything we had seen and showed them the bite marks on Jerry's arms. "This is incredible," the detective said doubtfully. "You mean to say someone is using hypnosis to make people kill?" "We don't know all the details," I replied, trying to stay calm. "But this man in the black cloak is dangerous. He's controlling people, and if we don't stop him, more people will die." After a long discussion, the police decided to act. They went with us to the abandoned house, and I felt the tension in my shoulders growing. This place was the source of our terror, and I didn't know what we would find inside. The interior was dark, damp, and filled with an eerie silence. My heart raced, pounding in my chest like a drum as we navigated the labyrinthine corridors. In the depths of the house, we found him, the man in the black cloak. He stood in a dimly lit room, his back turned to us. His presence radiated a malevolent energy that made my skin crawl. Next to him, bound and terrified, was Tracy. She was alive, but her eyes were filled with fear. "Stop right there," the detective shouted, his gun aimed at the cloaked figure. "You're surrounded. Surrender now." The man in the cloak slowly turned around, and a chilling smile spread across his face. His eyes gleamed with madness. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered. "I'm the embodiment of fear, a shadow that will always exist." The police officers advanced, but the man fought back with an unexpected ferocity. After a brutal struggle, they managed to subdue and arrest him. With the man finally restrained, we could see his face clearly. He looked like an ordinary person, but his eyes held a deep, unsettling insanity. As the police led him away, he continued to laugh, a hollow, chilling sound that echoed in the dark corridors. Tracy was quickly untied, and she collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "It's over," I whispered, holding her tightly. "You're safe now." In the days that followed, the truth about the man in the black cloak came to light. He was a local resident who had become obsessed with the urban legends of our town. Mentally ill, he'd fixated on the stories of the killer from 80 years ago, convincing himself that he was the reincarnation of that monster. Using his knowledge of hypnosis, he had managed to control his victims, forcing them to bring others to him. The bite marks he left were part of his twisted ritual, a way to mark his prey and instill fear. It turned out that the people he hypnotized, like Jerry, were not entirely aware of their actions, which explained the gaps in their memories. Tracy was safe, though deeply traumatized by her ordeal. Jerry slowly began to recover from his experiences, and our friendship grew even stronger as we supported each other through the healing process. The town began to return to normal, though the scars of those dark days would never fully fade.